In this video, we are going to look at how to connect our data with Tableau and do our first kind of data exploration. So I'm going to be using Tableau Desktop, though I'll make a video for Tableau Web. They work the same. When you open it up, you'll see something similar to what you see on my screen here, where it needs to connect to the data, or you can open one of the projects you started before. First step is always either opening a project or connecting data. And in this case, I'm going to be connecting data. My data is in a CSV file. You will find that most of the time your data is either an Excel file or a CSV file. If it's a CSV file, we need to use the text file to open it up. A little confusing since it doesn't say anywhere about CSV here. But it's important that you use the text file to open up our CSV files. In fact, if you try to open it up with Excel, you won't even see the CSV file there. So let me open up my CSV file. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to bring up what the data actually looks like in our file. When you create your own data, your data should look something similar to this. It should be in rows and columns with not too much extra space in there. So you can see here we have a header at the very top, and then we have our data right under it. And we have several columns. We have like the report number, report date. This is actually crime data from Kansas City in 2023. We have the date that it's reported. We have the offense, descriptions, and things like this. And maybe the first thing you want to do is just look at the data in the Excel file itself. Kind of give an understanding of what the data is going to look like. Here we have actual times that are reported. We have dates that are reported. You'll see sometimes some things are not filled. Like the to date and the to time are often not filled. Offense is in there every time. IBRS, which I think is the code for the offense, is usually in there, but not always. Same with the description. And so you can see kind of the format our data is in, the format the address itself is in, and things like that. There's some other things in here that I do want to explain. So there's a DV flag. This is for domestic violence. If there was domestic violence, it will show that here. This shows us who was involved, whether it was a victim or a suspect, the race of the individual, the sex of the individual, sometimes the age, and if a firearm was used. And then finally, there's some things over here like location. Now, right now, this location data is not able to be used because of the formats in. If we change it a little bit to make it just the point, then Tableau will be able to recognize it, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. So all I had to do was open my data in Tableau. I see something like this now that it has been uploaded. And I can start with my first sheet. So I want to go to my worksheet. I see my different tables, and that's why it is important when you make your data that you actually name the columns at the top, okay? If you don't have named columns, then it's going to be kind of hard to see it in the tables here. And we're going to begin by just building our first, our first kind of exploration into data, okay? So I'm not sure exactly what story I want to tell with this data yet. So I may want to just look at some simple things like, let's look at offenses. And I put that up there. And you should note that there are two ways data can be shown in Tableau. It can either be a dimension or a measure. A dimension is like the actual separate data points with all the named. So we can see here all the different offenses that are possible in the system or that have been that are in our data set. And now maybe I want to do the count by each one. So the first thing I'm going to try is I'm going to look at the show me. This is nice because it will show you the different sort of graphs you can make and what you kind of need for it. So for a bar graph, what I want to look at, I need at least one measure, and a dimension is optional. So I don't have a measure. I need to measure the offenses. And this is the most complicated part about Tableau, is if I want a measure of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click it. I'm going to drag it over while it's right-clicked. When I drop it, this form is going to come up. And now I can look at what is the max offense, which I don't know if that would make sense in our case, but I can look at the count. And the second one, count with the D there, is count by distinct. Okay, so I don't think I want to count distinct offenses. I want to count each individual offense, and so I do something like that. And now we see here, each offense is listed down here, and then we have a bar graph of how many counts there are in my data set. So this is crimes from the beginning of the year to now, from yesterday, and the number of counts. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to make this a little bit more legible. So I'm going to flip this. I'm going to swap the rows and columns. So that way this is looking like this, so I can kind of read it. I'm going to move this column over so I can read everything. And then what I can do is I can sort. And so I'm going to sort. So the first thing I notice in my data exploration is that the number one offense in Kansas City, number one crime, is stolen vehicles, stolen autos. In the year so far, we have 2,005 of those. Unfortunately, the next one under that is domestic violence, property damage, stealing, shoplifting, and you can see. So this year so far, we've had 106 forgeries, 175 murders. Okay, and these are all up to date. So this is kind of a nice look. Maybe the first thing I want to look at is stolen autos, and maybe what zip codes and what area is the most likely to have your car stolen or something like that. I'm going to creep this graph like here because I'm just doing some data exploration, and I may want to do another data exploration. This time, since I know the data, I'm going to show you when you might get the hint that the data is malformed or doesn't work quite right. Sometimes the data we get is dirty and we have to clean it up. And we're going to see this with the zip code data. So normally with zip codes, we can kind of put that in there. And then I can usually click on the map and it will usually make us a map of the zip code data. However, something is malformed about it, and so I am unable to do that. My guess is I'm going to have to go through and kind of clean up some of the zip code data. There might be a reason that it's not allowing me to do that. I might want to hide the null. I don't think that'll help me though. Because ideally what we'll have is our zip codes kind of in a map here. And if you've never used Tableau, you might think that it's you making a mistake, but in this case it is the data itself is not helpful. So what we can do is we can go back to our table view at least for now. And then maybe I want to do the count of offenses by zip code. Okay, so I want to look at offenses and I want to look at the count. So just a reminder, how I do that is I do that with the right click, move it over, and then do count. Okay, I'm going to undo this, so I'm going to do Control Z to undo it. There's another way of doing that if you can't right click. If you hold Shift and click and move it over. No, that didn't work. No, it must have to be right click. So right click, move it over. There's probably another way of doing it. I can help you if need be. And so I'm going to filter our zip codes. And so we see the zip code with the highest crime rate, just by a count of offenses, is 64111. My zip code, 64131, is pretty high up there. Is that number 5? Or 6. With almost 1,000 offenses. And we see some of these zip codes with less, way less. And the first thing you may want to look at is, well, there's zip codes on here with none. And the reason for this is some crimes that get committed and reported happen in other zip codes, but they get reported in Kansas City. So just looking at this, I know that 30301 is not in our city. At least I'm guessing. So I'm going to look 303 zip code. I'm going to look that up real fast. That is Martin City. So you see kind of right by Grandview. And you can see here where a map would be super helpful. We will try one more time, but I don't have any hope. Nope. Eventually, we will plot this against a map so you can kind of see it like that. But here, this gives us an idea. Maybe we explore these top 5 zip codes a little bit more in depth. Okay. I'm going to look at just one more graph. I may want to look at, let's see, offenses. Okay. I may want to look at this in several ways. So offenses, I want to look to see if there was a firearm used. So you'll see with these two, it's a true or false statement. So it was a firearm used. And I can try to put that down here. I could mess with it a little bit. I think I'm going to end up wanting to put it up here, though. And then I'm going to right-click, move it, and then count my offenses. My offenses are going to be what I count. Okay. I'm going to flip it again. And we see a lot of things that's not very helpful. Okay, so I see a lot of false. I see a lot of true. Firearm used. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a little bit of a more complicated thing before I end out the video. I'm going to show a filter on this. Okay. I show the filter. Just know that sometimes the show me filter it will hide stuff. Okay. So now I have a filter on this firearm. I can look at just the ones that have true. Okay. So I can I've filtered it. I can probably actually get rid of it. Okay. So it's no longer even reported on here, but I can still filter. Okay. I can still filter by firearm used. And so this shows me most of the time when a firearm's used, it's used in either an assault, a robbery, sometimes domestic violence, sometimes murder. And so, not too surprising. So one final thing before I end this out, things that would be next steps for me is we do have things like location, but you'll notice again the location is in kind of a weird format. It's in this point format. I know from experience that if I had it in the actual, that's a GPS coordinate, if I had just the GPS coordinate, it'd actually be able to show it on the map, I think. There's also an address in here, so let me show you what the address looks like. Sometimes the address can be plotted. In this case, the address cannot be plotted because of how they format it. Again, these are things that I could go and clean up. I'd have to actually clean it up in this database. I'm going to programmatically do that for a lot of these things, like removing the point. I might combine the address or something like that. And I can do that in two ways. I can either use Python programming or do some of that by hand. Just kind of depends. But that gives me kind of next steps for next time, is kind of clean up the data so I can look a little bit more. I'm starting to get some stories that I may want to look at, such as looking at, maybe some stolen autos is kind of interesting to me, what areas those might be. Different zip codes, maybe break it up by offense. I can see what's the highest offense by zip code. And we see that, in this zip code, it's shoplifting. So I wonder if we removed shoplifting with this zip code drop, something like that. So some stories to start thinking about, some stories to start telling. So it gives me a jump start. So hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of how to start playing with this data. I want you to get kind of familiar with this data, but then you need to start plugging in your data and playing with that. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you.